You're watching CGTV, Community Government Television, Channel 11, Pitkin County, City of Aspen, and Town of Snowmass Village.
The City of Aspen, established in 1881, has over 220 full-time employees, a number that swells to more than 425 with the addition of seasonal and temporary workers. Organized into more than 20 departments, the City of Aspen provides major amenities like parks, a rec center, and open space, and services like utilities and police and Kids First to its residents and visitors. From the golf course to the Community Development Department, the Wheeler Opera House to the Parking Department, the City of Aspen and its employees strive to do the best job possible. A major goal of the city is keeping open communication between the government and the citizens. Welcome to City Matters, a show where the city does matter, and matters of the city are brought to you. Hello and welcome to City Matters. I'm Mitzi Rapkin, Community Relations Director for the City of Aspen, and here we talk about all things city, and I'm greatly honored to be joined today by a new council member, Rachel Richards. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for organizing this, Mitzi.
I guess you're kind of like a renew council member.
That would be a good way to look at it.
So when did you first serve on council?
I was first elected in June of 1991.
And how long did you serve then?
I served 2 council terms, so 8 years with John Bennett as mayor and a diverse cast of other council members.
And then you've also served as county commissioner.
Yes.
And then what made you decide to come back?
Well, if we don't jump too far ahead, after the 2 terms as a city council member, I was mayor for 2 years, 99, 2001. I was defeated by a narrow margin by Helen Clanderud, who I respect very much, and she served as mayor, and then I rejoined council in 2003 to work with her. I've always felt it's more important just to have a seat at the table and 1 vote out of 5 than particularly a title. And I did that until about '07 when a county commissioner seat became vacant, and friends encouraged me to run for that, which I did. And that was a 12-year stint because you're allowed 3 4-year terms. And it was just a wonderful experience. And as that was ending and overlapping with the new date on the city elections, I had to make kind of a quick choice. Did I want to do it? But there's just so many issues that remain unresolved. And perhaps some of the things we care about the most are more threatened now than ever before. Our water resources, our public lands, the internal challenges we've always had, housing, childcare facilities, things like that. And this is my home. I want to contribute, and I want to help shape the future and make the day-to-day lives of our citizens better.
What did you notice that might be interesting for our viewers as the difference between serving on kind of a city and a county role?
Well, the counties are considered a branch of the state government, and the salaries are set by the General Assembly based on certain criteria about the size of the county and things like that. So the county does pay you as a full-time job, and I took it as a full-time job and made the most of what I could do there. I think it's fair to say the county has been more actively involved in the public land issues that surround us, although with my election to council, we are shifting to have more of a policy person in those areas. It's very important to be able to at least be on the record for these limited public hearing time periods on things like reducing air quality standards, reducing water quality standards, changing the timelines in which a NEPA, a National Environmental Policy Act, decision is reached. We are surrounded by 89% public lands in Pitkin County as a whole, and certainly the city of Aspen. And so we have a big stake in those things. And I'd like to see us participating more in those sort of hearings. Aspen carries a loud voice, and using that voice perhaps through the Colorado Association of Ski Towns, groups like Colorado Municipal League, and certainly trying to take it to a national level like National League of Cities. The other real difference is the county deals with issues such as health and human service as that branch of the state. So child welfare protection, senior abuse, senior protection, Medicaid, Medicare signups, things like that. So really very heavily involved in community health type of issues, and of course the airport. So they're interrelated, and we certainly work together in partnership on a lot of areas, and so this was a chance to continue those partnerships.
And I know for you, the environment, water, housing are big issues. When you came into council, do you have any like hopes or issues you really want to tackle?
Yeah, all of them.
Yeah.
I don't think you have to be single focused. It's more about creating clear direction and good policy for the staff who works with us and under us. When you're council, you're a decision maker on policy, but you're a figurehead of the community. And so it's not as if you can say, I'm housing only or I'm transportation only. These are all challenges, and they often are interrelated, frankly. How far do you commute to work? How many people can we get on the RAFTA buses versus issues of growth and housing availability and the economy. Issues that rose to the top, clearly from listening to the public, were the lack of housing opportunities for people. And that has been highlighted by the recent regional housing study that was done that showed both very interesting commuting patterns, that a lot of the workforce of Glenwood commutes into Glenwood. A lot of the workforce from Carbondale commutes either down to Glenwood or maybe up to Basalt. But the Roaring Fork Corridor, Highway 82 RAFTA, is not that just up to Aspen and back down there. The whole valley is growing and changing. We're certainly seeing the prices of homes throughout the Mid-Valley accelerate far beyond the middle wages. And in the past, it was a bit of a safety valve. You have a lot of older sheriff deputies that might live up at Missouri Heights, or school teachers in Carbondale, and they're really, their replacement workers as they retire will not be able to buy those same homes at that prices.
Do you think there's like innovative ways that you can think of when we look at these policies that we can combine them more?
I think they should be complementary. I don't know. Sometimes it's more logistics about the funding sources and legally, but you're right. And I didn't mean to, in that last discussion about housing, exclude childcare, because I believe our housing program is both about workforce and also about having a healthy community, a community that lives from generation to generation and includes our seniors and includes our children. I do not think you can attract a quality workforce who can't take care of the full stages of their life. We've always had a lot of transient workers, and some stick. I was one who stuck, maybe you're one who's stuck, and begin contributing to the town and making a future here. So for those people who may thought they'd be single and out on the town forever, end up having great relationships and children, and suddenly their needs and desires change. But if you want to keep those people here and not just have a permanently transient workforce that just comes in for a season or two and is gone, and you're constantly retraining or trying to recruit people for often very technical jobs. And I will say being a chef is as important as perhaps being an electrical lineman, but it's a unique job and skill set you need to be able to recruit people for, drinking water standards, these sort of things. So I see housing as something that just creates our sense of community, creates the workforce, and keeps us from being an artificial town where the lights go off at night and they lock the door like Disneyland.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to see like what those drivers are. Like for instance, the rents in Aspen have a lot to do, like the commercial rents, the kinds of stores we have, but also the price that people are willing to pay for workers. So, for example, in a small affordable housing unit, trying to find an electrician can be really challenging because they want the job at Red Mountain. And that all ties back to the commute and the housing and all of that, and looking at that holistically.
Yeah, I saw some folks in a parking lot. I live in deed restricted housing. I was fortunate to buy a unit at Hunter Creek Condominiums in 1988. And Hunter Creek used to be Silver King, and it was all rental housing, when I first got here. But the free market got a hold of it, and most of the buildings have been turned into free market housing units. But it's got an older iron bathtub, and I saw some guys in the parking lot, and they reglaze bathtubs. And I'm like, oh, I could use that. And I said, well, how much about would it be? And they said, oh, I think it was about $650, and so that already was a little bit of a gulp. And then he goes, oh, and we add on a $250 service charge for coming to Aspen. And I think they were out of Junction, so maybe that's a little more justified. But I do know people in other trades who, they're going to account for that time on the highway and the hassles of coming up here. And, there's getting to be a nationwide shortage of tradesmen. So it's not unique to our area. But all these things go into the long-term sustainability and affordability. They are linked, as you're saying.
Yeah, and I know you just had your retreat, and that's where you kind of decide how you're going to work together as a council and talk about some of your goals. Was there anything that came out of that stood out for you?
I think we have had a full majority turnover on the city council. So I have some experience, and then, of course, Ward and Ann have experience, and Tori has experience. But to gel as a totally new council, Skippy is the total newbie, and he brings tremendous energy and excitement and ideas to the table. But to really coalesce into a working group, I think, is one of our key goals, all of us. We don't want to have what seemed to be a little bit of going on in the past, where people would have a favorite project and they thought they had buy-in from the rest of the council, and then when they get back to the table, it's like, no, we don't all really agree with that, and someone else's special project, but to make sure we're all unified in our approach to these major issues. And we got a really great refresher on where the city's priorities are now, what was set as a course for 2019 in the 2019 budget, and to give some direction on that. The item I think we particularly bumped up was there was going to be a child care working group task force. How do we create more child care facilities slated for 2020? And we said, no, we have to begin that in 2019. That's really a challenge, and it's not going away, and the people not finding the care now, they don't have time to wait for us to get our act together. So I'd really like to see that advance. But housing has got a lot of challenges, and when we create housing with the revenues, the taxes that the public has approved for those purposes, we're paying free market land prices, and we're paying free market construction prices. And just recently we've been looking at how much the tariffs are going to cost all of us, as they're costing all American citizens, whether you're buying a washer and dryer or that can of Campbell's soup. We're all paying more because of the trade wars, and that's painful. That's painful to think that you're getting this extra expense unnecessarily out of taxpayer dollars, out of the pockets of the taxpayers.
Yeah, that's hard. Being a public servant for decades, have you found any secrets to success, whether it's, getting legislation that you think is really important passed, like how you do that, or anything else that has allowed you to be this successful?
Well, I think it's a number of things that hopefully come together. One of the most important is really to listen to people up front and to have some concept of where you're going, but then take that input of the pitfalls, the concerns, the value judgments, and try to craft that. At the end of the day, part of it is really just being able to make a decision and live with the consequences. You're never going to make everybody happy, and you want to make sure it's been a fair and balanced decision with all the information possible. and then to explain to people why I can't go where you want me to go, or I can't support the position you're asking me to support. You know, when you're trying to please everyone, you please no one. And things, you do have to live with the fact that sometimes, even when it's a good friend, people will often say the hardest thing to do is say no. And it's the most important at times.
Do you have certain ways that you've mollified that for yourself over the years? I mean, because obviously you take that home with you.
You live it. You live it every day. And, you know, the input is really helpful. Sometimes it'll just keep rolling around the back of your mind or the bottom of your stomach until you really have to cast that vote, and you make your comments on why, and you're hopeful that people understand that. And some people will be like, you know, this person's getting 80% of what I want done, I understand. Other people are like, unless you're there at 100%, you're no longer my friend. You know, you just have to live with it. So that's part of it. You have to be able to live with the conscience that I know what I'm shooting for. I can look back at a number of elections we've had throughout our community, and, you know, it's great when something comes out 70-30 or 60-40, but there's still that 40% who did not like the direction that was decided. A prime example would be Burlingame site. When I was mayor, we had the opportunity and drawn all the paperwork up for annexing that into the city for the creation of affordable housing. That was an action, the annexation, that we could take from the table as city council. But I said I wanted to put it to a public vote because I knew the mayor's term is very short at 2 years, 24 months, and I wanted to create the mandate and check in. And it did pass 60-40. But then the next council wasn't really advancing it, and it come back to no for a variety of reasons. And that's when I ran to get back on council in 2003 to make sure we built Burlingame. I was elected with that mandate, and then we started the processes of designing it and so on and so forth. And we had the ordinance approving the Burlingame design, and that was put to a referendum. And the results came back with the same 60-40. So I have talked to a few folks who were on the other side of that battle since, and they've either sold their free market home or had children who needed affordable housing, and suddenly it was a good thing. The red brick where we're sitting today is a perfect example. As you know, it only passed by 3 votes. And we had arguments that the art groups are flaky and they'll never make their rent, to I already give by taxes, why should I give other ways? And yet this is one of the most successful things this town has ever done to preserve this building and have a home affordably for nonprofit art groups, the gymnasium for the kids, and it would have just been all empty second homes. And so sometimes we tear ourselves apart in our votes. And Sue Lum was the one who wrote an article afterwards saying, I just never thought as carefully about my protest vote before, because it would have been such a shame to lose the red brick.
Yeah.
And so you just have to live with it and go with your heart and your gut, and the public tells you if you're wrong.
Yeah. Have you noticed over the years the sort of issues your constituents care about changing? Like, have you noticed like the types of emails or phone calls you get? And maybe decades is too long.
No. I think you just see some things come to a head more that haven't in the past. And I think clearly climate change, climate crisis, resiliency, mitigation, those are the top of the list. And it's there. And this is something that was in the background, and there's, disputes about the urgency and everything like that, say in the 90s. But it's front and center now. So I'd say that is the number one. Housing is more acute than ever, but at the same time, the challenges of character and growth are the same that were there before. Water has become clearly more important. We're seeing the development on the Front Range, 80% of the state's population. Pitkin County is the second most heavily diverted county in Colorado now as a headwaters community. We're only behind Grand County. And when the Windy Gap Ferning project and Moffett Tunnel enlargement is completed, they will be diverted 80% of their native flows westward. So, that was a big, hey, let's watch out here in Pitkin County. We have some real issues. It's hard to realize that during a great snow and water year like this, but that was part of what led to us passing the Healthy Rivers and Stream Fund tax. It's a 1/10 of a cent countywide, and it has allowed us to really be prepared and combat some of those things and make sure we both have the legal firepower and then the representation at the state. I was very active in that as the state was preparing the Colorado Water Plan, but those issues haven't gone away. And those folks who are on the west slope perhaps are more endangered than the Front Range because of population issues. But when you have the river district starting to pay people not to grow, or through other revenues they collect to not grow, just so we can get more water down into Lake Powell, that's scary, because will that eventually mean the end of West Slope Ag? And are your Front Range water providers going to be buying and drying the orchards of Grand Junction? So we need to be on the lookout for how those things shape out.
Do sometimes I hear from people, well, I know that that climate change is a really big issue, but we're just a city. What can we do? Do you ever hear that, and what do you say?
I don't hear it in that form as much as I hear from people that it's just not real. Or the other version of that is like, yeah, it's real, but look at China, And the thing is, these have become easy cliches to throw out there as opposed to factual. China is taking the advantage away from American technology and solar manufacturers now. And our government's pull back on that, and to say coal is king and let's get coal back up and running. That's like 18th century England or something, we don't have to worry about particulate matter or air pollution deaths. It's a dirty source, and unfortunately, clean coal has never come to pass. And hundreds of millions have been spent federally on carbon capture studies and clean coal, and it just hasn't gotten us anywhere. And what's really changed, which is very hard for people to acknowledge, is the economy and the affordability of solar, wind power, and these things. As battery storage is going forward, as other things are going forward, you literally just have to look at the example of computers, when in the past what I have on my phone would take up half this room, and if we just keep advancing clean transportation technology, clean energy supplies, I think we can get there, but we are at the juncture where there's no time to waste.
Do you think the city council can do, there's things they can do and things they can't. Do you think they can move the needle on things like job growth in Pitkin County?
Well, that's a really hard one. I don't know. We're going to see the market itself and private sector investments in automation potentially changing a great deal of the economy. But it's really hard to predict. Service level often is personal. But look in Japan and Asia, and they have robots that check you in, and robots that bring you your room service, and robots that do all this. And these people don't need these machines don't need health insurance. They don't
housing.
They don't come sick. They don't really need housing. And it's changing all sorts of things, whether it's self-driving cars or whatever. But that doesn't mean they won't be creating new problems, or that they have new concerns. I mean, people talk about, well, I'll have these great self-driving cars, they'll pick you up, they'll take you to work, and this and that. It's like, well, where do you park all those self-driving cars at night? And how many self-driving cars do you need for the rush hour? It's hard to visualize the changes we're starting to see, but I think you just always prepare a good, solid base based on good reasoning. And job growth is a tough one. It's a really tough issue. You have more self-checkouts at City Market. Do people like self-checkouts? Do people feel like that's undermining workers? We're just trying to eliminate workers. So
Yeah.
I don't think our goal is to be out there creating jobs. We spend more time mitigating jobs, but people have private property rights, and you will see property owners wanting to either develop on vacant land that they own or redeveloping older projects, older parcels. And that's natural. As much as our town doesn't like to think change like that is natural, buildings have a useful life. They tend to wear out, and those owners in a free market have a right to make that choice. Do I want to scrape and replace and play the mitigation and build something, for the year 21, or do we try to restore? And you have that nowhere land where something's not historic, and they fully have those choices.
Do you have any sort of like dream policies, like maybe something that isn't, wow, that realistic? Like maybe it's the gondola attaching us to Glenwood, but like if you could sort of envision something that might even be within reach, but really hard politically to get to.
Well, if I had some dreams, it would be around water, because I see that as a long-term and environmental issue. In our water system of Colorado, we have what are called conditional rights that someone have filed a long time ago and say, I intend to build this and use this water. Every either 6 to 8 years, those rights must be renewed with something called a diligence filing, where you prove I can and I will. I can and I will do it. Because we did not believe that the River District and the Divide project over in the Silt Rifle area could or would really build a dam, flood Redstone, and take all that water away out of the crystal, we filed as an opposer at Pitkin County and eventually prevailed, and those water rights were abandoned. But there are still conditional water rights to take another 20% out of the Frying Pan and the Roaring Fork. And those people can adjudicate them, and they will get the date of the original conditional filing, which means other water users who develop their water after that might be cut off or reduced flows. I would love to see the state create a benefit to people to abandon their conditional water rights. Because right now, it's kind of like, I got to pay attorneys, I got to go to water court, I got to prove it up, my diligence every 6 or 8 years. And people are afraid to let that go because it's like losing value out of their portfolio if they're a Denver Water or Aurora or Colorado Springs Utilities or private parties. And if we could create a tax credit for people to abandon those water rights, it would kind of leave the river the same. The existing users would know what they were getting. But so that's where I would go. Real complicated policy.
But a good dream.
And I would create a lot of housing really quickly and 2 new child care facilities. So
that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining. If people want to reach you, you're at rachel.richards@cityofaspen.com.
Yes, and it's RACHAEL, which is unusual for people because I always went by just Rachel with an EL. And that's how my first grade teacher taught me to spell it. And it wasn't until later life with TSA and everything like that, I looked at my birth certificate and boy, it's spelled RACHAEL. So
that's how to find her.
That's how to meet me at City Hall.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Mitzi, and thanks, Grassroots.
Yeah. Thank you for watching.
You're watching CGTV, Community Government Television, Channel 11. Pitkin County, City of Aspen, and Town of Snowmass Village.
The City of Aspen, established in 1881, has over 220 full-time employees, a number that swells to more than 425 with the addition of seasonal and temporary workers. Organized into more than 20 departments, the City of Aspen provides major amenities like parks, a rec center, and open space, and services like utilities and police and Kids First to its residents and visitors. From the golf course to the Community Development Department, the Wheeler Opera House to the Parking Department, the City of Aspen and its employees strive to do the best job possible. A major goal of the city is keeping open communication between the government and the citizens. Welcome to City Matters, a show where the city does matter, and matters of the city are brought to you.